Drag queens for career day, big mouths on sex, Planned Parenthood everywhere, and what educationally we need to know about the upcoming elections. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. People routinely tell me I'm a funhouse version of Jason Statham. I like that comparison very much. Every week we cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses across the nation. Greetings to all of our longtime listeners, and if you haven't done so, please consider clicking the subscribe button to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or any place you get podcasts. Coming up later in the show, we'll be talking to our good friend, international correspondent Alex Newman, about drag queens and career days in middle school campuses in Colorado. And with that, I'd like to bring on board Katie Petrick of the Healthy Republic to begin the show.
All right, so we're going to talk today, we're going to kick off about the midterms because they're less than 2 weeks away. And being the education show that we are, let's take a look at how education and the midterms kind of combined. And what does it mean for our classrooms? I found a story by Time Magazine that was released earlier this month, and it's talking about how hundreds of teachers are running for political office at all levels. Some of these teachers have left the classroom to go campaign, while others are actually still teaching in the classrooms while campaigning for these various offices. So Mara Sloan is a spokeswoman for the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, and she said that her group alone knows of 650 educators who are running for office, and of course, more than 450 of them are Democrats.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot more than 450 of them. And you know, it's hard to, this is America, first of all. If that's what you want to do, you can do it. I do think it's a bit of a conflict of interest to be running for public office while you are teaching in a classroom. But when you think about the degree to which the American public classroom has become nothing more than a conduit for politics, our entire education system, and this is something we've been lamenting for years, our entire education system has been given over to progressive politics. Call it social justice, call it Marxism, call it indoctrination. What's happening in our public schools now is progressive agenda talking points have worked their way into every aspect of your kid's education from preschool to graduate school. And so the idea that these primarily Democrat teachers are going to run for office while they're teaching, or they're going to drop out of school to teach, it's a perfect commitment, right? Because what they've been doing in those classrooms, practicing on little children for years and years and years, perfectly prepares them for careers as Democrat politicians. Talking points, lack of critical thinking, emotional appeals, that's what we're getting from our progressive politicians. It's what our progressive teachers are teaching our kids. It almost seems pretty soon, why not just do it? Why not just turn Congress and have a daycare center attached to Congress where you can bring up all the little government kids in good progressive values. Those things will mesh perfectly together.
Yeah, and if you take a look at this, we are less than 2 weeks away from this midterm election. If these 450 or more politicians, I guess they are now as well, if they're in their classrooms basically practicing, like you said, in front of their students, what are they talking about? What issues are they bringing up? I mean, we've been talking for weeks and months now, all of the different things that, you know, the mob mentality happening with the left and the Kavanaugh hearings. And now the latest is, you know, the caravan/invasion, as I'm calling it. What is it that these teachers are teaching our students?
It's so obvious. Just look at the Democrat progressive wish list. Open borders, right? You've got now with the caravan of love, according to lefties, making its way to America. Look at how the usual suspects are acting. The Kamala Harrises, the Cory Bookers, the Chuck Schumers, all these, the Dianne Feinsteins. The argument they're making now is that this caravan, who has, let's be clear about this, these aren't illegal refugees clamoring to the border because they're starving to death, wind-torn and soaked. These are primarily working-age males, very robust and husky. They're not starving to death. They are marching on our borders. They're not sneaking in dry riverbeds or being ushered in by coyotes. They are attacking the border with a sense of tremendous entitlement. You can't stop us from coming to your country. This is an invasion. This is not a refugee situation. But you think about, you ask the question, if our teachers now are giving up the pretense that they're not politicians and running for political office while they're teaching, what kind of things are they getting? Hashtag Me Too, right? Hashtag Believe All Women. Open borders is what they're getting. What they're getting is radical transgenderism, as we're going to see when we talk to Alex Newman coming up. Drag queens showing up on middle school campuses to talk about Career Day. Guarantee you, no Christian ministers or stay-at-home moms are invited to Career Day, but drag queens now are. That's what they're getting, a nonstop dose of man-made anthropomorphic anthropomorphic global warming propaganda to the kids. Again and again and again and again, every wish list of Democrat politicians is already in your schools. So it makes sense that these high school, middle school, elementary school teachers are simply walking from one venue to another.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, since, again, I work at an apple orchard and I supervise a bunch of teenagers, I ask them every single weekend, you know, what are you reading in English class and what are you studying in social studies? And I have all of them, dozens, who have said they haven't yet read a single book this year. And I found one girl she found that they would be reading 2 books this entire school year. I took a look at her syllabus. And what are they doing? They've told me they're writing position papers, not only in English, but at the same time in social studies. Position papers on sex trafficking or the way abortion or the way we treat women. And just like you said, the hashtag #MeToo, all of this. Maybe their teachers aren't running for political office, but they're for sure putting the politics into their classroom.
And let that sink in, because what you're doing so you're working in your apple orchard with teenagers, right?
Yep.
High school sophomores, juniors.
It's middle schoolers all the way up to high schoolers, public school, private school. I mean, I don't have any homeschoolers.
And I ask routinely my college kids who've just come to the university from high school, how many books did you read? I'm an English professor. And it's the same argument. Oh, we read 2 books. In an entire 9-month semester, we've read 2 books. Give the audience an example of the 2 books that were cited in the classes you asked for. One of them was To Kill a Mockingbird.
It's Lord of the Flies.
Oh, excuse me, Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, it was going to be Lord of the Flies and it was Julius Caesar.
Right.
It was, yeah, because Shakespeare is required.
Now think about that. You've got a 9-month English class, and you're reading a relatively short novel, The Lord of the Flies, which is geared to middle school students, and you're reading one short Shakespearean play about 40 pages. That's the only serious reading these kids are doing in the entire semester. And they're filling those gaps with social projects, right? Presenting papers on all sorts of political issues, always from a progressive slant, right? Justifying all these leftist positions, never really allowing these kids to argue or fight back with the standard assumptions of the classroom.
And the same syllabus, because it was skeleton looking, this syllabus, but it said something about how they're going to look at how to be an effective teenager and study habits. But I'm like, what are they studying? There's nothing they're actually studying. Why do you need that for?
Bingo. They're not reading books, but they're reading books about how they ought to perhaps be reading books, right? So this whole thing is a scam now. I mean, it is, and I see it with my university kids. Their reading levels are so stunted. You can't put a complicated book in front of them. And the longer the book is, the more complicated the book is, the less they're going to read it. They are just and this is not even a matter of effort anymore. They have not been given the tools, the patience, the discipline, the guidance in terms of how to process long narratives. These are soundbite kids growing up in a soundbite country with their technology and learning the soundbite lessons of politics. And that's the danger. Progressives are very good at encapsulating their message in sound bites because there's not a lot of thought there. There's not a lot of intellect there. It's not a really deep argument to argue that compassion, right? When people come to our borders, we should let them in because we're generous. That requires no thought. That is a non sequitur argument. All the complicated arguments why an issue like borders should be explained to kids, how we should give them an example of history, what the separation of powers in this country are, what has happened historically to countries who do not check their borders. Rather than give them all that critical thinking, give them the emotional soundbite. We are preparing kids educationally in this country to only understand the soundbite, and that fits the progressive agenda perfectly.
And we'll see how it plays out because less than 2 weeks, midterm elections. But moving on, we can see what is happening when you get your students as freshmen and sophomores, because we just found out how ill-prepared they are based on their ACT scores. It's the time of year when we get to find out just how unprepared our students are for college, because the ACT releases the report. It's called the Condition of College and Career Readiness, based on the 2018 graduates. So these are your freshmen. And more than 1.9 million students have taken the ACTs this last year, which equates to about 55% of the overall graduating class. Well, here we go. Math is at a 14-year low. We found out that the percent of students who are ready to take algebra in that first year of college, the number fell to its lowest since 2004, 40%.
Only
40%.
4 out of 10 American school kids are prepared for algebra in college. 25, 30 years ago, you'd have been done with algebra by the time you got to be a sophomore in high school. These are college kids now who aren't even ready for late middle school, early high school math. It's a huge number. And think about what we're doing here. It's almost as if we put this show together with a theme, because the first story bleeds into the second story perfectly. Math. Our kids are getting soundbite math. Math is hard. Math requires sustained critical thinking skills. To be able to progress from simply multiplying and dividing, adding and subtracting, into word problems, to theories, to getting into things like geometry, trigonometry, it requires a more and more concentrated, extended effort, building on what you had learned in one semester, in 1 year, and advancing that learning in a sustained way. Our kids are unable to do that. And the thing that shocks me most, Katie, about this is not a bug to the American public school systems. This is a feature of the new math education. Look, we are not giving our kids an elitist math education. We are not pampering that 20% of kids who can do math above their grade level. We are going to focus on the 80% of kids who can't do math very well and don't like math very much. We're going to give them the same soundbite math education that we're giving them in their English classes. Don't make them read a lot. Don't make them think a lot. Don't make them work a lot. And spend a lot of time in math and English and science and social studies, making sure that their values align with our progressive values. Everything else is just gravy.
Yeah, the ACT, just so everyone knows, the way the scoring system works, it's on a scale of 1 to 36. And the ACT math score is now averaging a 20.5. It could go all the way to 36, but they made it 20.5, which is the lowest in 20 years.
The good news, our kids and many of our parents can't do enough math to figure out what the average means. So America doesn't even know how stupid we are in math. And that's progressive. That's Common Core math, ladies and gentlemen. Being stupid at something, taking one for the team. Being stupid at math because everybody else is stupid at math. Social justice math. And look, we're even too foolish and stupid to be able to figure out what the average means. 20 sounds pretty good.
I like how you said the average means.
Average means. I didn't even take I took statistics. Wasn't very good at it, but I took it.
I believe that.
I took it or that I wasn't any good at it?
Both.
Yeah.
All right.
But I can still calculate an average.
So the readiness in our other subjects is just as good. We have English, 60%. Hey, you should be happy. 60% of your students, which you've been saying.
Is that more than half?
I think so.
Okay.
That's also down from 64% being ready a couple years ago. In reading, 46% are ready. And then in science, which continues to be the least likely prepared for subject, is at 36% already.
Yep. And I've routinely made the argument unscientifically that about 4 out of 10 of my kids, 40%, apparently I underestimated that, 46% of our kids only are able to read college-level books at a college level. That means freshman level. And we're not talking about senior graduators. We're talking about freshmen in college being able to read at a freshman in college level 1 year after high school, only 46%. I don't know what to say here other than what we've said to you before. This is this is not an argument, it's not a bug, it's a feature. We are dumbing down your kids because A, that makes them more malleable. B, we can then spend a lot of time in the classroom socializing them, psychosocially evaluating them, providing them with a progressive worldview if we're not teaching them things. Number 3, this fits our weird notion that we can't raise the lowest performing kids. We've tried ever since kids were taking school, we've tried to raise the low performers. What we've realized now is it's easy to hold down the high performers in the name of social justice. And finally, and we've said this already twice in this show, also when you have kids who are unable to read for themselves, think for themselves, do math for themselves, eventually look after themselves and their families, these are kids that are ripe for the picking for Democrat politics. Government will take care of you. Government will handle it for you from cradle to grave. We'll take care of all the major decisions for you. You don't need to read fancy schmancy books. You just need to be aware of how inclusivity and diversity work. If you understand the progressive narrative about inclusivity and diversity and all that other tripe, then we'll take care of you. We'll provide for you. That's the future of this country, and it starts in your kids' classrooms.
And because I feel like being Debbie Downer today, and I actually taught statistics, I want to give you 2 more because they go hand in hand. It goes exactly with what you just said. 35%, so more than 1 in 3 of our students met not one of the 4 benchmarks, not one. And at the same time, 76%, so 3 in 4 students want to go to a 4-year college. And that says it all right there. They have absolutely no skills in being able to be ready for it, but they want to go to the 4-year college, and that's where they get even more indoctrinated.
And according to the values we're instilling in your kids, they're entitled. That 75% of kids that wants to go to college, even though only 1/3 of our kids are prepared for it, those kids will get in. And your universities, who spawned this politicization of education, will take them and will promptly dumb down their curriculum to meet the needs of those kids who shouldn't be there in the first place.
Yeah, and once we spend all that money on them in their elementary and their high school days, then they go to college, and then they're racked with debt.
And then they get in debt.
But don't worry, because if the Democrats retake the House, be on the lookout for your debt to kind of vanish. So there's basically a hidden plan in place that's going to stick the taxpayers with billions of dollars. National Review did this article, and basically they talked about how the Aim Higher Act, of course, that sounds so delightful, Aim Higher, is going to allow borrowers to get out of their loans, even though they...
Student loans,
even though they could afford to pay them back. And this was proposed by a Democrat in the House and a Democrat in the Senate. And basically, currently what's happening is we have this income-based repayment system, okay? So you have a borrower's payment is kind of capped at 10% of their income. It all depends on how much they're making. This new plan makes it so that the income exemption is going to jump 150 to 250%. So let's do a little scenario so you can kind of understand it. Let's say you make $35,000 a year, and right now you pay $140 a month, and you're working towards paying back this loan. Well, with annual growth, you're going to be able to pay back, maybe you have $30,000 in debt, college loan, that's the average. You'll get it paid off in that 20-year cap that's currently in place. The new plan would drop it to maybe only $39 a month you're now paying, and that's only going to, within that 20 years, cover the interest of your loan. So this principal is still going to be sitting there. That original money, that $30,000 you originally loaned, is still sitting there. And who's paying for it? Us.
Yep, and this is the thing. So the Democrats in Congress, and this makes perfect sense. I hope you see from the beginning of the show till now, and from now to the end of the show, how all of this is really fitting together. And that makes perfect sense. You are sending kids to college who don't belong. You are instilling in kids who you are not educating how utterly critical it is for them to go to college. And so they go to college, and then they're remedial, and then it takes them 5 or 7 years to get a 4-year degree. And then they take some 3 or 4 years to figure out what a major is because they keep failing out of them because they're not prepared for anything. Meanwhile, the college debt racks up. And in a system like this, the only logical outcome from a progressive point of view is to waive the penalty for college. Right? We didn't educate them. We can't hold the kids accountable. The kids took out the loans. These are kids who don't know anything about math. What do these kids know about compound interest when they can't even do algebra the first year of college? And so consequently, what do you have? The money means nothing. Just like money means nothing to progressive politicians, right? We'll just waive it. So we're going to waive all that money. The banks will still get paid, but that money's going to come out of our coffers, right? More debt. We're already trillions of dollars in debt, more debt now to cover this. And if you're a millennial, is it any surprise why you consider yourself a Democrat? Are you at least a bit surprised that all of this education that we've paid for as American taxpayers from the time you started going to school, by the time these kids were 4 or 5 years old, through the time they get to high school, we're paying for it. And it's not working. Again, less than 30% of our kids are prepared for college. It's not working. Then those kids go to college. Colleges take them in because we get all that federal student loan money. No matter how much your kid owes, we get paid, right, at universities. We take your kid. Your kid doesn't belong here. We're not going to tell your kid not to come. Come on and stick with us for 2 semesters, 3 semesters. We'll take your money. We'll fill your seats. We'll sell you dorm rooms. We'll keep all that money. And you fail out, guess what? It's on you, not us. And what happens now at the federal government with the Democrats? We will then waive your ability to pay. And this plan. Before you see this plan enacted, you're going to get some Democratic politician elected to a high enough office in the next 10 years where they're just going to waive college tuition altogether.
Well, and that's what, I mean, they are pushing for that.
That's right.
Because they want it to look more like what's happening in Europe.
When you waive college tuition eventually in this country, free college, then you've got to go back retroactively and waive all the loans that people took to go to college before it was free.
That's true. And if you want to get, again, Debbie Downer, that's who I am today, grad school loans are even double that. So the grad school loans, because it's the kids are going through this 5, 6 years. It's not even, I want to graduate in 3, 4 years. It's 5, 6 now because they're telling you, just stay and keep taking all these remedial courses. So then they're going to do that, and they don't know what they want to do, and they're confused, and they're like, well, I'm going to stay in my safety net. I'll just go to the grad school now. And then they take out even more loans, and there's no limit on the amount of loans you can get for grad school.
That's right.
So that's even more.
And then they'll have to be waived, too.
Absolutely.
If you take out $100,000 to get a PhD in sociology or English, something that's not going to pay you any money, why shouldn't you because you're not going to enter a profession that's going to get you paid like doctor or engineer, maybe you should have your loans waived because you're going into something that's public service, right? I'm going to be a sociologist, right? I'm going to talk about transgender parties for 12-year-olds and how we can incorporate them in middle school. And that's a very important thing to liberals, only we don't pay enough. What's going to happen here, if progressives get their way, and they're well on their way to it, in 50 years, you will have American school children basically be in school from the time they're 2 and 3-year-old, because we'll institute mandatory pre-K. The faster we can get kids away from mom and dad and into the public school system, the faster they lose whatever bond they had to the parents and to the parents' religion, the parents' local communities. From age 2 and 3, all the way to the time they're 30, they're going to be professional students who graduate professionally able to do nothing. They will be professional students for the first 27, 28 years of their lives, considered babies from the time they're 2 to the time they're 30, and when they graduate, they will be able to do nothing, absolutely nothing, with all of that education.
It just makes me weep for my own generation. So we're going to switch gears here, and let's talk about cartoons. Netflix has a series out. It's a Netflix original cartoon called Big Mouth. And this show it just released its 2nd season on Netflix earlier this month, and it celebrates, pedophilia, abortion, masturbation for preteens. So it's a cartoon show about middle schoolers and the struggles of puberty. And the tagline is coming of age all over the place. So if you watch any clip of it, every clip I've been forced to watch so far, you see cartoon genitalia, you see they're talking about abortion, they're talking about masturbation, and one of the creators, Nick Kroll, calls it a perverted Wonder Years, and he admits, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for telling kids to watch this show because it's super dirty. I do think because it's animated, we were able to say and do things that would have been very tough to do otherwise.
This is a show that has adult humor, but because it's a cartoon, they have tentatively slotted it for adolescent kids. And adolescent kids are watching it left and right. And what it is, it's an attempt to provide the most crass, over-the-top, juvenile kinds of sexual information to little kids, young kids, adolescents, who are at that age where they're going to soak that stuff up, right? And so this is a adult cartoon that, if it weren't a cartoon, it would be X-rated. You wouldn't be able to watch this. Being marketed and softened in such a way that you can provide it to adolescent kids. And I would simply argue that it is exactly the kind of things that your public schools are already doing.
Yeah, and the show specifically this season shows their politics and shows what their true priorities are, because they had episode 5, and it's called The Planned Parenthood Show, because co-creators Jennifer Flackett and Mark Levin, who's not the author of The Radio Personality, a different one, they went to a talk about Planned Parenthood's frustrations with people thinking that they're just about abortion. And so these creators came away and said, you know what, we want to help you. And so they got the entire writing cast to go on a tour of Planned Parenthood, and they were in the Los Angeles Planned Parenthood, and CEO Sue Dunlap basically helped them to then create this episode for the children. And the spokeswoman for Planned Parenthood said, there's a lot of stigma around abortion. So I was grateful when I saw that Big Mouth episode included a range of services.
Yeah, you know what? This, the destigmatizing of abortion is what this is about, too. And isn't it interesting that Planned Parenthood, who has their grubby little fingerprints over much of the sexuality curriculum, much of the sexuality lessons that your kids are getting, that have nothing to do with biology, by the way, the idea of what reproduction is. This is all about preferences, sexual mores, overcoming sexual taboos, teaching kids that things like anal sex are perfectly fine if you just do it a certain way, the logic of anal sex. Isn't it interesting that the grubby little DNA fingerprints of Planned Parenthood is all over what your kids are getting in the schools as adolescents and pre-adolescents, and these kinds of shows now? It is a concerted effort. It is a meshed effort on the part of progressives outside universities and schools and inside school administrations and staffs to bring a concerted message to give to bear on your kids. That if they're not thinking about sex, if they're not thinking about alternative sex, if they're not considering having sex, if they're not sexually active, if they're not confused about their gender, if they're not willing to entertain the possibility that they might be a woman trapped in a boy's body, then they aren't doing it right. Then there's something wrong with them. That everybody, everywhere, all the time, spends nothing in their day, does nothing in the course of their day, except for obsess about certain kinds of taboo sex, to fetishize abortion. All right? The idea that if you're going to have all this kind of sex any kind you want, with anyone you want, anyhow you want, then what is conception then?
we wonder why so many of our students then are angsty in middle school. And we actually have across the pond someone questioning this entire thing with what's happening with transitioning students who believe, they are female trapped in a boy's body or vice versa. So we have British Conservative and Equalities Minister Penny Mordaunt, who has ordered officials to discover the reasons why the number of girls are being referred for transitioning treatment. Why has it increased by 4,415%? Yes, it's that high. Girls as young as 4 are saying that they want to change sexes, and Mordaunt wants to know, is it social media? Are they the ones to blame? So psychologists and behavioral experts are going to explore, in the words of one source, why some girls think that modern life is easier to bear if they will become boys, which I thought
and
that
that's
language.
it. And there's where the feminism comes in, right? So in the United Kingdom, where they have lost their ever-loving minds when it comes to education, you think the American schools are bad. Look, you want to know what American schools will look like in 5 to 10 years? Watch what's happening in the United Kingdom schools, where they have mandatory pre-K, where they basically tell the largest teachers union in England basically tells its teachers that transgenders, the place for teaching transgenderism is in the preschool classroom. 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds must be taught about transgenderism. And lo and behold, you tell a 4-year-old that people who aren't transgender are bigots, and people who are transgender are heroes. You tell them that, and lo and behold, you have this huge uptick in 4-year-old girls who want to have transgender surgery, for God's sake. And of course, when Britain starts to look, this was enough to radically alarm the Brits, right? Because over a 4,000% jump in little kids who think that they're transgender.
Yeah, the specific numbers. So back in 2009, 2010, go back 8 years, 9 years, 97. Now, 2,519 children are saying we need gender treatment of some sort. We need to transition.
Little kids.
And the steepest rise has come among the girls. Back then, it was 40. And now it's 1,806, and 45 of them were under the age of 6.
Under the age of 6. And along come the feminists. So you think it's a good idea that the Brits have decided we have to look into this. This statistical anomaly doesn't make sense. Maybe, is it possible, the Brits asked, that by suggesting these things to little pre-adolescent minds, to the minds of 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, suggesting that they might be better off as a boy if they're a girl, to suggest that to them the teachers are authority figures. When you're a little kid, the teacher scares you to death, right? You want to be on the good side of the teacher, and the teacher's telling you these things in preschool. England started to concede the fact that maybe, just maybe, there was suggestion bias here. Right, that what was happening is that these kids were becoming transgender because they were being encouraged to by their progressive teachers. And then along come the feminists, as we see in that article, and why they're not worried about all that anymore. They're not worried about little kids as young as 3 and 4 doubting their gender. That's good. That's progressivism. However, we're worried about the fact that little girls seem to think now it's better to become little boys. And so what has reared its head here is the patriarchy, right? We don't need more little girls becoming little boys because of the patriarchy. What we need is more little boys renouncing their masculinity and becoming little girls. I guarantee you, if there was a 4,000% spike in elementary school boys wanting to become girls, the problem would be gone and done and solved as far as UK progressives are concerned.
And just so everyone's aware, last year, 800 children in England who were unhappy about the sex they were born with were given puberty-blocking injections, and some of them were as young as 10. And you're not anywhere near going through puberty yet. You still got a little bit of time there.
And isn't that remarkable that the one thing that would, in many ways, guarantee what your gender is, right? When puberty hits and testicles descend and little girls begin to have their periods, hormonal changes come over bodies, and guess what? Then you'll have a better sense. Why would we allow any kid who hasn't gone through puberty to change anything? You know that a huge biological shift is coming. You know that in 2 years, that little child will not be and see the world the same way because of the hormones. So in other words, rather than let nature take its course, we're going to allow a 9-year-old who's only heard the benefits and the joys of transgenderism to decide for him or herself what they're going to do. It's child abuse, for God's sake. I mean, not letting kids go through the logical biological changes before you decide to do something permanent with them. It is the worst kind of child abuse. It is destructive. It is torturing little kids. They're too young to make these decisions, and you're not giving them all the information. You're not letting their bodies do what they're going to do.
63% of the kids who are doing this transition surgery, they, prior to thinking that they wanted to change their gender, they've been diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder or a neurodevelopmental disability, and almost half had self-harmed, and then half of those had suffered a traumatic event in their lives. So it's not that they even know what they're doing. There are other factors.
It is so obvious. Little kids who've experienced trauma or have been made to feel bad because of trauma want to run away from themselves. 25, 40 years ago, these were little kids who wanted to be princes and princesses or fantasized about being pirates and running away on a ship. But now, because of this trauma, we suggest to kids that maybe this is an existential crisis of gender. We are putting this in our little kids' heads because it satisfies our own vanity. It's a way of demonstrating that our absolutely unscientific progressive ideas about gender are valid. Look, you give your kids to a progressive school, and 5 years later, those little kids think what we adults think, that gender is completely made up. These kids are Frankenstein monsters. This is, in biblical terms, there's something called eisegesis. Exegesis is when you go through Scripture and you try your best to explain what's there. Eisegesis is the process whereby you go to scriptural texts to simply find what you believe is there. You read texts, and we're going to see this in the last story of the day in teaching the Bible. I'm teaching the Bible right now on college campus. Eisegesis is when you read a scriptural text to find out what you want to find, your preconceived notion. In a way, what we're doing with these kids is adult progressives are selling and suggesting them at young ages so that they can verify their own assumptions as adults. This is criminal research criminality, right? It's like, I mean, we're one step away from the kinds of experiments the Nazis and the Japanese were doing in World War II, where they were messing with twins, where they were putting kids through all sorts of litmus tests, physical, emotional, and traumatic, psychological, to see what kind of kids, to see if they can breed kids to be the kind of kids. That's what the Hitler Youth did. Let's rigorously educate kids according to what we think adult kids can be, and see if we can turn those kids into Nazi adults. And lo and behold, they did. At which point, that justified to the Nazis that they had been doing it right. That's not research. That's not experimentation. That's not scientifically valid. It is criminal behavior.
That it is. We're going to switch gears just a little bit here to an elementary school that has decided to cancel Aladdin Jr., their performance because, of course, it stereotypes Arabs. In Maryland at Westtown Elementary School, their drama club had planned to put on Aladdin Jr. in February, but Danette Zagari Mask, who is a lawyer with the Council on American Islamic Relations, and and whose son attends the school, says that her son came home upset and humiliated. She said, in the play, Arabs are described as barbaric. Those are the exact words that are used. And the actual play was very controversial, apparently, in the early 90s. Her son has decided not to participate in the play. And so the school, basically, she went and complained to the school, and they decided, you know what?
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to cancel it.
We're going to cancel it.
Because, in the early 90s, when I watched Aladdin and I was, like, mesmerized by Robin Williams as Genie, I thought, those Arabs, I can't believe they're being portrayed in such a way.
This shows you the insanity of this. Disney has become, over the last 25 years, the most obnoxiously progressive entertainment industry in the business. These are the people that have transformed ESPN into a simple show about sports, into a daily social justice rant fest. And if you look at the Disney's programming for kids, it is highly sexualized. The show's geared for little kids. Oh, even Hannah Montana, my goodness. Think about what happened to Miley Cyrus under the aegis of Disney. So along comes Disney with fairy tales. And for 25 years, Disney has been making fairy tales that have been 100% politically correct. We've got Moana about the Samoans. We've got Pocahontas. In other words, fairy tales are okay if we star non-Westerners in them, right? If we have alternatives to Western culture, we highlight Arabic culture, we Hawaiian culture, we have one, right? What was it? Mulan, right?
Mulan.
Japanese culture. And so cutting edge progressivism, showing all these different colored princes and princesses, all this radical emphasis on non-Western values, exposing kids to multicultural ways of seeing the world. And along comes Native American activist. Pocahontas is racist. Pocahontas is gone. Along comes a lawyer working for the Council of Islamic American Relations, a care lawyer, right? And boom, it's gone. We've already seen How to Kill a Mockingbird, one of the most woke books of the early 1960s, helping us get beyond Jim Crow racism, is now racist because it tried to do that by using the N-word. This is the kind of fascism that undercuts all of this, and it's fascist now. You can't have any movies for kids. It's ironic, isn't it? That, what's the name of the show?
Aladdin Jr.
Aladdin Jr., right? So Aladdin now has to be canceled because it's a bad it's a bad role model for little kids. Big Mouth, on the other hand, a show that we just talked about that is one long masturbation Planned Parenthood joke, that is not only acceptable for kids, it is necessary for them. This is the world we now inhabit. And you see the fascist undertones of this. Whatever propaganda fits the agenda of those who are educating our kids, it's thumbs up and it's okay. But the minute any kind of it, even from woke companies like Disney, one person is all it takes to protest, and the whole edifice comes down. Think about the show we did last week, where they're canceling play versions of things like To Kill a Mockingbird. They're killing it off because somebody somewhere is offended. One voice out of hundreds on the left is enough to shut down anything.
Yeah, well, let's go to that interview that Dr. Duke did with Alex Newman about what is happening in our schools with Career Day and drag queens.
Alex Newman, you're over in Greece, the land that invented mathematics in the West, at least. Why is it that career days in public schools no longer have to deal with firemen and police officers and lawyers? Now it's drag queens showing up in American public schools for Career Day. Tell us a little bit about this story.
Yeah, and before somebody says, oh my goodness, that's got to be fake news, they're making stuff up, it is absolutely true. You can even read it from the so-called mainstream media. They literally brought in a drag queen called Jessica Lahore. I kid you not, that's the name. And apparently children in 4 separate classes were subjected to this. Unbelievable stuff. They literally brought in this drag queen. Apparently, the career of this drag queen is dressing up in women's clothing and running around using innuendo about prostitution. And so now the kids have a real role model to look up to in terms of their future careers. I don't know how many drag queens the economy could support, but I kid you not, right? I don't know whether they brought in any prostitutes, porn stars, axe murderers, bank robbers, anything like that. But they did bring in this drag queen, and they said it's to help represent the diversity of our community.
Yeah, that's amazing. And even more alarming, parents were not notified that mom and dad what mom and dad in Colorado wouldn't have recognized this was inappropriate. But moms and dads were not given the opportunity to even know what was happening. And this is a theme you and I have been talking about for 5 years now. The public schools feel they have absolute carte blanche to expose your kids to anything. Any progressive agenda item. Again, you mentioned why not bring in a crack whore, right? I mean, why by this argument, the only professions that you will not see represented in a public school career day are housewife. Can you imagine that bringing in a transgendered woman, not even a transgendered woman, actually, just a transvestite, a man who dresses like women now for career day, you would never bring in a housewife. You would never bring in a stay-at-home mom. That would send the wrong anti-feminist message. But to bring in a man in women's clothing and to have this done without consulting the parents, this is a big, big red flag for moms and dads. And if they're doing this to you with something as overt and obvious as this, what else are they keeping from your kids, from your parents?
Yeah, and that seems to be the philosophy of government schools all across America. Expose these kids to these horrifying things, and then afterwards say, well, we're kind of a little bit sorry, and in the future we'll ask you guys first, and all the rest of it. But it's like that old metaphor with the toothpaste. Once it's out, you can't put it back in the tube. Once the kids have been exposed to this, you can't unexpose them to this. Right now, they've already been told that they can pursue a drag queen career and they can travel around America dressing up as the opposite gender. I mean, It's unbelievable. And, the other one you can be sure, along with housewife, is not going to be present is a Christian pastor, right? Much less one who would want to talk to the kids about marriage or, family or gender or, any of those outdated things. And then, of course, maybe a biologist could come in and teach the kids, well, hey, guys, I know the drag queen said one thing, but in reality, there are only two genders, right? That would be absolutely faux pas. That would probably be teaching the kids religion, right? Under the non-existent First Amendment that the schools like to cite. So we're in really big trouble here. And, it's telling, I think, that the school didn't even apologize. They said, yeah, well, we probably should have told parents beforehand, but we're not going to say sorry, right? So that's where we're at today in America.
Yeah, that's right. And not only did they did a half apology, they said basically, we apologize for not notifying you, but we adamantly do not apologize for bringing a drag queen, a transvestite, to talk to your middle school kids. We do not apologize for that because we did it in the name of inclusivity and diversity. And please explain to me, notice how they misbilled this. Career Day was the excuse to bring him in. That was the excuse. And then when they were pushed on this, they said, no, we did this to expose your kids to what we consider to be inclusivity and diversity. And so lies, 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 cover your tracks. This is a big deal. There are very few American school kids, when asked, 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds, when they come home from school, you ask them over the dinner table, Johnny, what'd you do today? There are very few 12-year-olds who aren't going to say, oh, mommy, we had a man dressed as a woman come talk to us. This is obvious, right? How many other aspects of sexuality, alternative sexuality, how many other aspects of things that moms and dads would want to keep their kids away from, certainly at the ages of 12 and 13, are being pushed on your kids now without you being told in the schools? If they can go this far, they can push the envelope this far to bring in a drag queen without consulting parents to talk to little kids. What can't they conceal from your families?
Yeah, no, it's true. We're in very serious trouble as a nation when we have gender-confused individuals dressing up as, women coming in and teaching the kids that they can pursue a career in, drag queenism? I don't even know what you call a career in being a drag queen.
I think it's formally called drag queenery, I think is what.
Oh, okay, drag queen, thank you.
Coined the word there, yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, just, imagine 5 years ago telling people that this was going to happen. They would have laughed at you. They would have said, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're being an alarmist. You're just being anti-public schools just to be, a contrarian. But, of course, this is where we are. And because nothing is going to happen to them after this, they're going to go even further next year, right? We'll have Mexican drug cartel lords coming in and teaching the kids about what it's like to be a cartel boss, and you chop up your enemies when they don't pay you your money, right? This is where we're going as a society. And frankly, as I conclude in the Newman report, at this point, parents now know what's happening. You are out of excuses now. If your children are being subjected to this, we still have the freedom to homeschool. We still have the freedom to pull them out and put them in a Christian school. If your children are being subjected to this, and they will be damaged by this, you can be sure. This is on you, mom and dad. This is on you, taxpayer, for allowing this to happen. It's terribly sad, but that, I think, is where we're going as a culture. And unless and until moms and dads start doing what hurts, right? Taking your kids out and costing them federal dollars and state dollars, this kind of insanity is going to continue.
And the undercurrent of this, Alex, as you know, is that the undercurrent of what we're teaching our kids at the youngest ages now is that normal heterosexuality, traditional marriage, is the outlier. That's what's odd. That's what's abnormal. That's what's exclusive. Every other kind of alternative sexuality, every other kind of gender, besides simply the male and the female now, are considered exotic and progressive and socially just. We're not just exposing kids to radical alternatives. We're convincing these kids that if they're traditionally heterosexual or they believe they're little boys who believe they're boys, we're teaching them that there's something wrong with them. And that's the real crime here.
It is. And, parents, if this isn't a wake-up call for you, I mean, I can't imagine. If this isn't crossing the line for you, where is your line, right? Start thinking about it now. Where is my line? Do they have to bring in, a naked porn star? Because they'll do that, right? What is your line?
They're already doing it. They're already doing it on college campuses, Alex, with all these porn fairs, right? They're having sex experts, and they're bringing in sex toy clinics, and they're having anal sex seminars on college campuses for 18-year-old and 19-year-old kids. What's to say that that's what's good for the 19-year-old has got to be good for the 12-year-old if you're sexualizing children now in elementary school?
Yeah, and that's where this is going, inevitably, right? And if you read the statement that the school district spokesman put out, it's filled with grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes. I mean, you'd think we were dealing with a drag queen school rather than a regular school where they're supposed to teach people how to read and write. But you get the sense that they don't see that there's anything wrong with putting a drag queen in front of your children and teaching them that this is an acceptable career to pursue. So again, mom and dad, think about this. What is going to be your line before you finally say, that's too far?
Well, if you're looking for a one-credit course this upcoming spring, we have an option at Pomona College. You can take Queer Theory and the Bible. It's a course at how the Bible can be read productively through queer theory by examining excerpts that are central to prohibitions on homosexuality, as well as discourses on heteronormativity, through which homophobic readings of the Bible are born. We will also look at the ways in which these discourses and the identities they shore up can be queered, as well as biblical texts that can be read as queer-friendly. This process of queering will allow and require us to approach the biblical text in new ways. Now, I know you're teaching the Bible right now, so is this what you're doing in your class?
No, I'm not.
Right now?
What I'm doing is letting kids read the Bible. That class has nothing to do with the Bible. Do you hear what the course just said? To basically read the Bible and to come away with any kind of a negative attitude towards homosexuality is to misread it. According to these people, the Bible must be read in a pro-homosexual, anti-heteronormative way. So if you read scriptures, you read the book of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation, what you're going to find is heterosexuality almost exclusively, almost without question. Not only are you going to find in the tenets and in the characters and in the action of the Bible radical heterosexuality, you are also going to find here and there actual condemnations of homosexuality. You will find no embracing statements about homosexuality. You will find actual condemnations. And so, according to this course, to read the Bible the way the Bible is writ is an act of heteronormativity. If you take the Bible the way it was written, you are by definition a bigot. And the only way to not be a bigot is to queer the Bible, right? So we are going to take Scripture and we are going to make it say exactly the opposite of what it says. And we will allow you to read and study that. And that's the Bible you will discuss and talk about. You will not talk about the actual Bible. Welcome to what happens in colleges and universities. This is not just about the Bible. When your kids read Shakespeare, they're not getting Shakespeare. They are getting feminist Shakespeare or Marxist Shakespeare or environmentalist Shakespeare. We are doing this to books all across the canon. When we're not substituting the great books of Western culture with highly politicized books like Ta-Nehisi Coates' new account of Black Lives Matter, when we're not taking great books out and putting sociological trash like that in their place. We are putting good books in front of them and then never allowing the kids to read the books. At the university I teach at, I'm teaching a Bible as literature class. In other words, I'm explaining how literary tropes. In the Bible, you'll find song and parable, and you'll find epic and tragic. So I'm applying literary traditions to biblical culture. And yet, into doing that, I'm not prefiguring this. I'm not telling kids, start with feminism or Marxism. Let's read the Bible as it's told and analyze the way that the Bible works literarily. We don't do that anymore on college campuses. And the funny thing, I keep getting kids in my classes from all other disciplines who aren't even English majors who sign up for my class because they tell me in the religious studies program, we don't ever get to read the Bible. We're always forced to queer it or to feminize it or to environmentalize it or to bring Marxist liberation theology in. So these kids are really upset. And some of these kids are liberals. They don't believe what the Bible says, but they want to read it. They want to see what it says. And the lament I hear again and again and again is, Pesta, I may not agree with you. I may not like your worldview. I may not like the fact that you believe much of what the Bible says. However, in your class, I get a fair shake. I don't spend an entire semester listening to Pesta's view of the Bible. We get to read the book. We get to talk about the book. We get history and culture that surrounds the book. It's sad. What kind of a sad commentary is it that in religious studies programs across the country, your kids who want to major in theology, who want to perhaps become pastors, they never get a chance to read the book. They got to come to an English professor's class, and believe me, most English professors ain't teaching the Bible the way I do.
What's your vocab word of the day? Exegesis?
Eisegesis.
Well, eisegesis
Exegesis is when you read the Bible for what it says and let kids make up their own mind.
That's the word.
Eisegesis is when you decide that the Bible must be pro-gay or it's worthless, and you force kids to only read it from a pro-gay perspective. That's eisegesis. Another word for it is lying.
And now you have your vocab words of the day, exegesis and eisegesis. Go tell all your friends and share the Dr. Duke Show with all your friends. Make sure you listen on your favorite podcast platform, and please, 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 give us a 5-star review. It's the only reviews we accept around here. It's 5 or nothing, so give us 5 stars or you won't be allowed to give a review.
And that does it for us this week, mate, on the Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you've heard, please share and podcast with your friends. Tell them to subscribe. Make sure they cover that 5-star review for us. Helps us find new viewers for the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we'll see you next time.